Hello everyone, I'm Ullegh NP. Today I'm speaking to Dr. Mats Gilbert. Dr. Gilbert is a Norwegian physician who is on the Novak emergency team for Gaza. He has worked with the Palestinians since 1981 as a specialist in emergency medicine and anesthesiology. He was in Gaza during several previous bombardments of the region. He's speaking to us from Cairo, Egypt, where he waits for an opportunity to enter Gaza through the Rafah border crossing.
Dr. Gilbert, so my first question to you is how long have you been waiting in Cairo to get an opportunity to enter Gaza and join your former colleagues?
I have been waiting here in Cairo, in Egypt, for more than 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, with a little Norwegian emergency medical team, supported by the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs. We, in this team, we are a few doctors, a surgeon. I am an anesthesiologist and emergency physician myself, and one nurse. Now we have split the team a little bit. I am the only one in the team now, and I will continue to do the applications and wait to get into Gaza, and I will be joined by the whole team when and if we get the permission. It is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking to want to go in and help the very, very hardworking Palestinian doctors and nurses in the hospitals in Shifa, and wanting to go in and to be together with them and share their duties and their flights now, and then not to be allowed to go in. It is very, very painful.
Doctor, are you in touch with those doctors, your former colleagues, on a daily basis? So what is the
Yes,
news
I
that
am.
you get from there?
Yes, I am. I am in daily contact with them when the Israelis are not turning off the mobile phone net. I am in daily contact with them. I exchange messages. I exchange videos and pictures from the clinical work in the hospitals. And my colleagues also do filming when the hospitals are bombed, around the hospital and in the hospital. The latest news I got today was from the bombing of the Turkish Friendship Hospital in Middle Gaza, where they were surrounded by Israeli tanks. And last night it was bombed 2 stories up. And what my colleague is telling me now is that they are destroying the hospital, a cancer hospital. So the situation is very dramatic. And I am updated by text, by video, by pictures, and by voice messages continuously, night and day.
So this is not the first time, as though everyone knows you have been associated with Palestinians and you've been working among Palestinians for 4 decades. So compared with previous occasions when you were in Gaza during similar bombardments, so how different does it appear, especially this one, the latest one that's happening?
This situation is the worst ever. There has never been a situation like this. And I believe we have to go back in history, very far back, to see a similar cruelty against civilians. Look, the Palestinians in Gaza, they have been incarcerated in Gaza for 17 years. There has been a blockade, a siege of Gaza. Remember that the population is by and large very young people. Half of them are children. So it's more than 1 million children. So for 17 years, they have been incarcerated, and the civil society has gradually been smoldering away because of the siege. And there has been repetitious bombings. What is going on now is beyond all imagination.
I've read about you, and I've read your comments before, and you have always said that whenever you have worked in Gaza before, it's always the civilians, majority of them children and women, who end up coming to your table, dead or alive. So even as children are dying, Israel is now claiming that Hamas uses hospitals as terror infrastructure and as command and control centers. And what are your thoughts on this claim? Because IDF spokesperson has categorically called this infrastructure as underground metro tunnels.
Well, we have heard these allegations since 2007. We have heard the claims from the Israelis that the Palestinians are using Shifa Hospital as a command center. I have been working in Shifa for 16 years, on and off, and I've been there during all the latest attacks on Gaza. And I have never been controlled. I would imagine if it was an important control center somewhere, up or underground, there would be some sort of security control. I have walked all over the hospital. I've taken pictures and videos and talked to people, and I've never been restricted. They have never checked my camera. I never had any orders not to go there or not to go there. So that's one thing. So I haven't seen it. And I follow the Geneva Convention. So I wouldn't work in a place which was a military hospital. Number two, the Israelis have an extremely detailed intelligence on everything in Gaza. They have x-rayed the ground. They know where all the tunnels are. They have intelligence among the Palestinians. They have the mobile phones of all the Palestinians. They claim to be the best intelligence army in the world, intelligence service. So why can't they just put on the table and show the proofs? I think the Israelis want the world to discuss these allegations and these rumors that there are military command center in Shifa, instead of discussing the huge human plight, the avalanche of human suffering that is taking place in Gaza now. That they don't want the world to discuss the more than 3,300 killed children. And they don't want the world to discuss the more than 8,000 civilians killed altogether. I think these allegations has the purpose of distracting the journalists, the news media, and the public opinion, and they are serving as an excuse for the Israeli governmental army to attack hospitals. Which other governmental army is systematically attacking hospitals? Well, the Israeli army is the only one. Recently, there has been several attacks on Gaza, as you know, and during these attacks, there has always been attacks on healthcare. The WHO just now reported more than 100 attacks from the Israeli army on different elements in healthcare, ambulances, medical staff, hospitals, and clinics during these 3 last weeks. The UN report, the WHO report, showed these attacks. For us, who have been working with the Palestinians for the last 40 years, this is nothing new. Israel systematically will attack civilian structures, schools, mosques, churches, roads, water pipelines, sewage systems, hospital, homes, everything, fishing boats even, because they want to smolder, they want to destroy the fabric of human life, the fabric of society, in order to get rid of the Palestinian people. This is the politics of elimination, and it's a well-known politics from the colonial, praxis. It is the settler colonial project, and you have to get rid of the natives, the locals. So this is what we see unfolding, unfortunately, for all of us. We are not writing 1820. We are writing not 1920. We are writing 2023. And we thought the world was a better place. But what we see in Gaza now is a huge setback for humanity, because all the international agreements that should regulate the fighting parties, they are completely ignored by Israel.
Why is it that this country alone, Israel alone, is able to walk away with impunity and be unaccountable to international community despite all these excesses?
Well, it's a good question, and I think you should ask President Biden that question, first of all, and you should ask the EU president that question, first of all. Don't forget that neither the United States nor Israel are members of the International Criminal Court. So they don't care about that. Don't forget that the United Nations General Assembly a few days ago voted to demand an immediate ceasefire, an immediate opening for the entry of humanitarian goods and lifting the siege of Gaza. Who voted against that? A couple of small countries, Israel and the United States. So the impunity of Israel is heavily based on the unconditional support from the United States of America, both with weapons, money, but also with this political support, which is creating this space of impunity. And I've many times, and I've written many papers asking, why is this impunity? How come that they can kill 3,300 Palestinian children in 3 weeks? They kill one Palestinian child each 10 minutes, and nobody stops them from the West. We know where the people of the world are standing. We see what's happening in London, 500,000. We see what's happening in Delhi, in Doha, in Stockholm, in Oslo, in New York, in Washington. Good people all over the world say, enough is enough. We don't want this. Still, the bombing, the killing continues as you and I are speaking. Right now, I got the message that they are completely destroying, or the destruction is going on against the Palestinian Cancer Hospital in Gaza. I know this hospital very well. It's called the Turkish Friendship Hospital, but it is now designated to be the central cancer hospital in Gaza. Who would bomb a cancer hospital full of patients? So far, nobody killed. Large parts of the building structure is destroyed. It was a beautiful hospital. I was there in June. I've been working on cancer care for a long time, and now it's been destroyed, just like they did with Ahl Arab and the threat of Al-Quds Hospital to be bombed. I mean, it's sort of it's filmed, it's casted live on all television stations, as if it's a kind of a war game on a television game. It's horrendous because it is deteriorating the protection of civilian people all over the world. When Israel can do this with impunity, anybody can do it.
In terms of propaganda, how often do Israelis or IDF lie?
Well, in my experience, I mean, we have to be fair. Lying is part of the war propaganda from the fighting parties. They all lie, that's part of the psychological warfare. The problem with the Israeli lying is that they are completely denying realities. That's even filmed and shown. When Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, the brave Palestinian Al Jazeera journalist, she was shot by an Israeli sniper. And what did the Israelis say? Oh, she was shot by the Palestinians. And then it took months until they said, well, it might have been that she was shot by the Israeli soldiers. Mm-hmm. So this technique of denying and throwing the suspicion and the guilt on the other party, it's their modus operandi. They do it all the time. They do it all the time. And the latest example was, of course, when President Biden echoed the Israelis by saying, we don't believe their numbers. We don't believe their numbers. Now, I'll tell you what. I think the Palestinian people now is the only people on earth who have to prove their own death. I think the Palestinian people is the only people on earth who are degraded to the extent that they are even not believed when they are carrying their killed children and women to the graveyard. I know how they calculate and how they count, because I'm a scientist also. I do research, and I've been doing research based on these numbers way back from 2006. I have been counting how many injured, how many killed, how many had this injury, how many had this injury. And we, in order to trust these numbers, as we always do as scientists, we went through and we examined, how do you collect these numbers? So I went to the office in the administrative building of Shifa Hospital, which was the counting office. There were 4 desks and 4 people sitting, and they were phoning to all the other hospitals and clinics in Gaza at given times every day, and they got the names, the date of birth, the father's name, the place of death, and they recorded it. And these numbers were summed up every day. They were handed to the Ministry of Health. They were quality assured. If they were not sure, they would mark not sure. These data, they have been the foundation for the reporting of WHO, of the UN OCHA, and even of the US State Department. So, and when we published our studies in the Lancet and British Medical Journal based on these numbers, nobody would doubt them because we could prove how they were collected. Now, that's no problem for the Israelis. They just say, oh, they're lying. And why are they lying? Because they are the native people. They are the brown people. They are the locals. We cannot trust them. It's part of colonialism. It's part of the racism, the very heavy racism embedded in this occupation and colonization project, which is the root cause. Look, I'm a medical doctor. I'm trained. I've been a medical doctor for 50 years this year. And I'm trained not to be misguided by symptoms. I always have to use the symptom to try to find the cause, the illness, the fundamental cause. I cannot only look at the patient saying, oh, I have pain here, I have pain in the chest, and give some morphine and say, oh, that will fix the pain. I have to look beyond the pain and start to examine the patient and do my investigations, X-rays, CT, blood tests, and so on, to find out, could it be, for example, a cancer? Could it be some lump? What could it be? And then I need to treat the root cause. What we're seeing today is the symptom of a much larger problem, a much larger problem. And that root cause is the occupation of Palestine. Mm-hmm. You know, many people say that, oh, it's such a difficult conflict in the Middle East, the conflict between Israel and Palestine. No, this is not a difficult conflict. This is a difficult occupation. Mm-hmm. And this difficult occupation has been ongoing for more than 70 years. Mm-hmm. And this difficult occupation has been enlarged, expanded with new occupations, with new colonies, also called settlements, with new colonizers and occupiers, also called settlers. Mm-hmm. So the land of Palestine is shrinking, 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 shrinking. The rule of apartheid is increasing, increasing, increasing. And I think, to be honest, that the plan now, it is to shovel the Palestinian people out of Gaza into the Sinai Desert and occupy and take Gaza as part of the colony of Israel. Yes. Because Israel, at the end of the day, is a huge US colony, and it would not sustain without the military and financial support of the United States. So as a doctor, I have to look for the root cause. The root cause is the occupation, the injustice, and the racist apartheid regime that the Palestinians are living under.
Yeah, now looking at the challenges in the field, you know, as an emergency physician, you know, how do you manage things? You know, have you managed things when you have run short of a local anesthesia or general anesthesia? Or what are the challenges that doctors are facing there now? Do they have access to local anesthesia and other things?
You know, it is a sad thing about your question that the right people to answer that question, my Palestinian colleagues, they are not able to answer that question because they are being locked out from the community that we all belong to. They are not allowed to have access to the communication tools that you and I have. So I don't like to be in the position of being sort of the Gaza expert. I want the real experts, the Palestinian doctors and nurses and ambulance paramedics. I want them to answer these questions because when I listen to them, when I'm there, I get the full scope of the challenges, the problems, the dangers, and the horrors of working in these situations. But I'll try to give you an answer since I've been working there so many times. And I will say this, the Palestinian medical community, doctors, nurses, medical students, dental students, nursing students, paramedics, volunteers, all the people working in the civil protection who are digging in the ruins, these people have been so hard-boiled through all these years of occupation and bombing that they master this situation at a level that I don't know of any other people who master it in the way they do. What do? They improvise, they find new solutions, they make simplicity, they try to simplify the solutions, and they try to stand together. There is an Arab word which is part of the Palestinian psyche, the Palestinian virtue. It's called sumud in Palestinian, in Arab, and it means steadfastness. And this steadfastness is very, very palpable in the medical community. And we've seen it these days when the Israelis have been threatening to bomb the hospitals, and they have been shouting on the phone to the medical directors of Shifa and Al-Quds Hospital. What did they say? They said, we are not leaving our patients. We will not empty the hospital. You can threaten us as much as you like, but we have a moral, we have a consciousness, we have a fundament of being humans that you don't have, because maybe you would have left your patients in your hospitals if you were threatened. We are not doing that. And the doctors, they had meetings with the nurses and the other staff. They discussed the threats. They decided together, we are not leaving. So it was not only a command from the management or from the heads of the hospitals in Ramallah or in the Ministry of Health. No, it is the staff. So this steadfastness is a very, very, very pronounced quality of the healthcare people in Gaza. In addition to this sustained energy that they work for not 1 day or 2 days, not 1 week or 2 weeks, but 3 weeks around the clock. They know that their own families can come into the hospital severely wounded or even killed. They know that so far 116 medical workers have been killed by the Israeli governmental occupation army. They know that 25 ambulances have been shot to pieces, often with the ambulance staff and patients inside. They know that they've had to shut down 12 hospitals in Gaza because of either destruction from the bombing and or lack of supplies and fuel for the generators. They know that they've had to shut down 32 primary healthcare clinics. Despite all this hardship, which would make many of us just lie down and cry on the floor and give up, they are standing tall. They are treating their patients. They are stepping over the hundreds of patients even lying on the floor, but getting care, getting treatment. And they look at me, they look me in the eyes and they say, we are not giving up. We stand by our patients. So how do you work in a situation like this? Well, to sum up, you don't give up. You support each other. You improvise. You make simpler solutions to complex problems. And you try to distribute the weight so that they take patients from Shifa to maybe Gaza European, or they distribute the patients. I remember in 2009, we had, there was massive bombing and we had a large number of patients coming in, and I think we had 12 or 13 that needed immediate life-saving surgery with good prognosis. We only had 6 operating rooms. They were all full. What did the Palestinians do? Something that I never thought of. They just put an extra operating table in each of the 6 rooms. Now, they increased the capacity by 100% with that move. Now, I was given the responsibility for room number 6. And in there, we had 2 tables, 2 patients. One lady with a chest injury, operated by one medical surgical team. And we had a little boy, I think he was 10, with a shrapnel wound to his liver, who needed laparotomy. I tended to him mostly. But then we had this beautiful, very clever Palestinian anesthesia nurse, and she would do the machines for both patients. So we operated 2 patients at the same time in one operating room. This is just one example of how they solve it, how they manage. And I tell you what, the world has so much to learn from the Palestinian people.
Yeah, in many parts of the world, including in India, there's a growing tendency to take sides with Israel and forget the tragedies of the people of Gaza. And this is in direct contrast with the tradition that India has had. So it also speaks volumes about Israel's growing influence. So what are your thoughts on this kind of a growing influence and insensitivity on the part of certain governments to look away from the plight of the Gazans?
Well, I think you have to be a political scientist to give a good answer to that, and I'm a medical scientist. So, I think number one, I think it's important not to only speak about the Palestinians in Gaza, but we need to talk about the Palestinians in the occupied territories, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. And recently, as we have seen, there has been a dramatic increase in the incursions and attacks in the West Bank, and more than 100 Palestinians have been killed during the last period of time, and which is a very large number. It's as if Palestinian lives no longer count. They are the slaves in a way. They can only be consumed, which is a very dangerous way of thinking. And also, we have to remember the millions of Palestinians in the diaspora who have lived their lives in refugee camps in Jordan and in Lebanon and in Libya and in Syria and in other places, being chased away from their homeland in 1948. And I think also it's an erosion of the fundamental rights of a human being, which, among other things, you should be granted human rights, one thing. And number one. Number two, all refugees have the right to return. And the right of return for the Palestinian people has been completely obliterated and in a way forgotten and obfuscated by all these rhetorics that Israel has the right to defend itself. So I'm not sure if I share your general sum up that the global South, both people and governments, are siding up with Israel. I think by and large now that the world will see and get much more information about the atrocities taking place in Gaza and in the West Bank, because we have a new factor, and that factor is social media. And social media speaks unfilteredly to common ordinary people and to the young people. The filter is through the mainstream media, who is trying to be balanced and blah blah and speak to the power, and there is a little government control here and there. They tend to give a very distorted picture of what is going on. So I think a new factor now is that we have a new generation of young people who are very conscientious about human rights, about their individual rights. If you just look at the discussion about gender rights, about sexual preferences and the rights, all these movements, I think they will identify by and large very strongly with Palestinian youth. Don't forget that I believe it's 68% of the inhabitants in Gaza are under 25 of the 2.2 million, and around 1 million is below 18. So it's a very young generation, and they are clever in their communication now. And we see, I take an example. I gave an interview yesterday here in Cairo for the US radio TV station Democracy Now!
Yeah.
And it was live.
Man.
Yeah, and they made a little X, with a part of the interview. And before I have reached back here to where I am after an hour, 2 hours after, I think it had reached 1 million viewers. So there is one layer of official politics and the mainstream media telling one story, and then there is an undercurrent of communication, people to people, heart to heart, mother to mother, brother to brother, young people to young people all over the world. And I see, interestingly, that even if UK has taken a very pro-Israeli stance, they kicked Jeremy Corbyn out of Labour because he was pro-Palestinian. They have tried to make new laws. It's not even, some countries in Europe, you're not allowed to flag a Palestinian flag, let alone having demonstrations. What happens in London? 500,000 people take to the streets. It's It's a river of people flowing through the streets of London for Palestine. Even in the situation where one could assume that this difficult discussion about what the Palestinian resistance did that Saturday when they broke the wall, when they bursted out of the ghetto and took to armed resistance. Even with that, a bit complicated discussion. I mean, I'm totally against any terror against civilians, but the right of the oppressed to fight occupation is anchored in international law. You know, you have the right to fight an occupier. That's why we support Ukraine with weapons and money and moral support, and all the presidents of Europe are going there because they are blue-eyed and blonde-haired and they like us, you know. So yeah, they can fight. But I think that I would challenge your perception of the status today. I don't think Israel is gaining support. I think they're losing support. I don't think Israel is gaining sympathy. I think they're losing sympathy. But that said, we should not forget that they are a large weapon exporter. They have sophisticated weapons. They have sophisticated means of fighting in cities. They have developed small, new, very small drones the size of an insect that can fly into people's bedrooms and kill them. And the rulers in the global south, they know that when the masses have got enough and start their resistance, it will be in the big cities. And Gaza is a test ground for urban fighting and for controlling civilian populations that do armed resistance in densely populated metropolitan areas, if you can call it that. Don't forget, there is almost 500,000 people living in Gaza City. It's very densely, it's very, very crowded. I think it's only Mumbai or some other big cities in India that have a more dense population than Gaza City. So the Israelis are providing weapons, tactics, and surveillance equipment that could be very appealing to the rulers in the south who wants to control their people. So there may be different reasons why Israel has this role of being popular among some governments, but I don't think among ordinary people with a heart, they are not gaining popularity. They are losing.
Again, I want to ask two questions in one go. One is, you know, in a situation like what we have in Gaza at the moment, what do you think are the kind of medicines and equipment that are needed the most? And secondly, why do you think that the Israelis are targeting the healthcare system in Gaza?
Number one, what is needed medically speaking, and I speak now as a professor of medicine, the most important provision from a medical point of view now, it's three things. Number one, stop the bombing, stop the production of new injuries. Number two, open the water pipelines to Gaza from Israel, turn on the light, get them electricity, and get them food. So water, light, food, energy for the generators. That's number two. And number three, open up for humanitarian support through all the gates of Gaza, not only in Rafah, but all the way where there are gates in. The international community must make a river of support into Gaza. Don't forget that normally on a normal day in the besieged Gaza, there will be around 400 trucks a day with necessary supplies to Gaza. Now it's been zero for almost 3 weeks, just a few, 12 on an average. So there is a backlog of 10,000 truckloads just to catch up with what they have lost of storage during these 3 weeks. I talked to the mayor of Gaza City just now. He said there is no more water. We have a very small desalination plant here in the north. Otherwise, there is no water. And we're drinking brackish water. And he said, and I asked him, are there any drinking water plants that can produce drinking water, bottled water? And he said, in fact, not. There is only one in the south, one small one. And he said, every drop of water cost us a drop of blood. He told me just now. So if you don't have water and food, people are dying. And this is the horrible thing about the siege of Gaza and the ongoing bombing. The Israeli army, the Israeli government is not defending themselves. They're not defending Israel. They are attacking the Palestinians. They are starving them. They are thirsting them. They are bleeding them to death. In addition, they are turning off the light and they're bombing them and killing them in the thousands. The last number of killed is 8,005. Among them, 3,324 children, and more than 1,000 children are missing under the rubble of the bombed buildings. That is 4,300 children in 3 weeks. Which other country, which other government would get away with killing 4,000 children in 3 weeks? Look, if the Ukrainian resistance, the army, the Ukrainian army fighting occupation, I support that. But if they started to target Russian schools, churches, and hospitals, and they killed, within 3 weeks, the Ukrainians killed 4,000 Russian children, I'm sure that EU and US would say, no, stop. You have to follow the Geneva Convention, right? We will not provide you more weapons if you don't, get your act together, fight the military goals. Israel, it's not only okay, they're really encouraging them to do this. And I heard the president of Israel yesterday, he said every civilian in Gaza is guilty and is responsible and is a target because they didn't stand up and they didn't, get rid of the Hamas government. Look, Hamas was elected in 2006. It was a big election in Palestine. It was controlled by all election observers and all that. It was the first democratically conducted election in the Arab world. And Hamas won a landslide victory. They formed a unity government with Fatah and PLO. This unity government was recognized by my government, the Norwegian government, the Russian government, a few more. Within weeks, it was shut down by US, Israel, and EU. And that's when the siege started. And that's when the new attacks on the Palestinians started. And then you isolated Hamas, which was the election winner. They had the struggle with the Fatah faction and all of that is history. But they are, in diplomatic language, they are named the de facto government. So this naming of it as Hamas, and Netanyahu wanted to set an equation mark between Hamas and ISIS. Now, it's stupid. I mean, Hamas have been fighting ISIS through the years. They don't want to see them at all. Hamas is an elected government. So I don't use that word. I use the word the Palestinian de facto government and the Palestinian armed resistance. Now, I don't support Hamas. I don't support Jihad or Fatah or PLO or PA. I, along with most solidarity workers, we support the Palestinian people and their right to resist the occupation, which is an illegal, inhuman occupation, with the arms that they are allowed to use within the framework of the Geneva Convention and the Hague Convention. But don't forget that the Palestinian has exactly the same right as the Ukrainian people to fight the occupation, as we did in Norway from 40 to 45 when we were fighting the German occupation. We threw them out. We had weapon stores in our churches. We had a civilian sort of a guerrilla warfare against the German army, and we threw them out. At the end of the day, we won together with the rest of Europe. So I think this misconception that this is a gang of terrorists like ISIS or anything else, it is only another smokescreen from Israel to try to obscure the fundamental problem. The root cause of all this misery is the occupation, the colonization of Palestine, and the ruthless apartheid regime.
What is your message to the leaders like Biden, Rishi Sunak, and others?
Try to behave. Try to take this moment in history and say, we stop it there. Try to remember the Geneva Convention. Try to remember for 1 second the Declaration of Human Rights from the UN. Try to remember for 1 second what kind of atrocities that are taking place in Gaza now. Try to remember that your name will be written into the history book, on the dark page or on the light page, on the wrong side or the right side of history. But I'm afraid that the Western governments, they are too embedded in their own colonial thinking, and they are too attached to Uncle Sam and his money and weapons to have a free spirit. Norway has condemned the siege. Norway has refused to call Hamas a terrorist organization, has of course condemned the attack on civilians from the Palestinians, rightfully so, as I do myself. And they have increased and not decreased their humanitarian assistance. So it's possible to take a stand, and every one of us these days will be judged from the stand we take, the voice we use to say our opinion. And the most important thing now is solidarity with the Palestinian people. I don't trust our leaders. I don't trust the leaders in Washington. I certainly do not trust the leaders in Tel Aviv. I don't trust the EU leaders, because they're all embedded in this hype of calling resistance terrorism. You know, as Mandela said, one man's liberator is the other man's terrorist. It depends on which side you're on. To be neutral is not a way. Bishop Desmond Tutu said, to be neutral in a situation of oppression puts you on the side with the oppressor. So my appeal to the governments and the presidents and the prime ministers is, check the facts. Check your law book. Check the international law, and stop this immediately. Tomorrow it may be too late. This is a mass murder, big scale, industrial mass murdering. And as the mayor of Gaza just said to me, we are confronted with a machine of destruction and killing. To read to you a message I got from one of my very good colleagues in Gaza, who is residing in the Al-Quds hospital. And he wrote me this message this morning. He's a very clever senior consultant. And he writes to me this morning at 11 o'clock. He says, good morning, Dr. Mads. It is calm around the Al-Quds hospital now, but all of Gaza is under fire. Bombing and clashes around the Turkish hospital since early morning. There was a bombing in Beach Camp, Hamid Street, where our house was, and many neighbors and friends were martyred, killed. More than 50 martyrs, more than 50 killed, excluding injuries. The situation is getting worse. No one hears us. The world is watching how we are being slaughtered. And I'd like to end with these words.
Yeah.
Don't be watching the slaughter. Stand up, voice your concern, be a human being, and follow the moral compass of our health colleagues in Gaza who stand by their patients and refuse to let the occupiers threaten them to lose hold of their moral compass.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Gilbert.